The phone call came at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning, and I knew before I picked it up that something was wrong. My mother never called before 9. She believed phone calls before 9 were for emergencies and telemarketers, and she had strong opinions about both. I sat up in bed, the early November light still gray behind my blinds, and watched her name flash on the screen. Diane. Not Mom. I'd changed it to Diane 2 years ago after a fight I couldn't remember the cause of anymore, only the feeling of it, like swallowing something sharp. Hello? Margaret? Her voice had that particular flatness she used when she'd already decided how a conversation was going to go. Your father and I need to talk to you. Can you come by the house tonight? Is Grandma okay? She's fine. This isn't about her. Then what is it? There was a pause. I could hear my father in the background, the rumble of his voice saying something I couldn't catch, and then my mother's hand muffling the receiver. When she came back, her voice had hardened the way it always did when she was about to deliver something she didn't want to defend. We'll talk tonight, Margaret. 7 o'clock. Don't be late. She hung up before I could answer. I sat there for a long time with the phone in my lap, watching the light change. Something was already broken. I didn't know yet what it was, but I felt it the way you feel a draft in a house, the way you know a window has been left open somewhere, even before you find it. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't know for another 14 hours, was that my parents had sold something that wasn't theirs to sell, and that the only thing standing between them and getting away with it was a single folded piece of paper, yellowed at the edges, tucked inside a book on a shelf in my apartment that nobody knew existed but me. If you're enjoying stories about real-life challenges, personal growth, and unforgettable life lessons, consider subscribing to the channel. New stories are released regularly, and you won't want to miss the next one. My name is Margaret Ellen Whitaker, and I'm 34 years old. I work as a paralegal at a mid-sized firm in downtown Cleveland, which is a job that pays my rent and not much else. And I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment above a bakery on West 25th. My neighbors complain about the smell of bread at 5 in the morning. I love it. I tell people I live there for the location, but really I live there because waking up to the smell of yeast and butter reminds me of my grandmother's kitchen. And there are very few things in my adult life that still feel like her. My grandmother's name was Eleanor Whitaker. Everyone called her Nell. She raised me as much as my parents did, maybe more, because my mother went back to work full-time when I was 4, and my father was the kind of man who showed up at dinner and went straight to the television afterward without making eye contact with anyone in the house. Nell was the one who taught me to bake bread. She was the one who sat with me through every fever, every nightmare, every heartbreak from 2nd grade to my 20s. She was the one who told me, when I was 19 and crying on her kitchen floor about a boy who wasn't worth crying over, that my worth was not something other people got to vote on. She died on a Sunday in April, 3 years ago, in the bedroom on the 2nd floor of the house she'd lived in for 51 years. The house on Edgewater Drive, with the wraparound porch and the apple tree in the back that her husband had planted the year my father was born. That house was supposed to come to me. She'd told me so, sitting on the porch swing the summer before she died. She'd held my hand the way she always did, dry and papery and warm, and she'd said, "Margaret, this house is yours when I'm gone. Your father doesn't want it. He never has. He's been trying to get me to sell it for 20 years so he could have the money. But this is your home too. It's always been your home, and I want you to have it." I remember laughing a little because I was 31 and I didn't want to talk about her dying. I told her she had plenty of time to change her mind. She'd looked at me with that quiet, level gaze of hers, the one that made you feel like she could see straight through whatever you were trying to hide, and she'd said, "I've already changed my will. It's done." I drove out to my parents' house that evening with a knot in my stomach the size of a fist. They lived in a development in Westlake, one of those neighborhoods where every house has 3 garages and a beige stone facade, and the lawns are cut to exactly the same height. I'd grown up in that house. I'd never liked it. It always felt like a hotel that someone had decorated to look like a home, but forgotten to put any soul into. My father opened the door. He was wearing the cardigan my mother had given him 3 Christmases ago, the one he hated but wore when he wanted to look harmless. That was the first sign. "Maggie," he said. "Come in." He never called me Maggie. He called me Margaret, the way my mother did, with the same careful detachment, as though saying my full name was a kind of formality between strangers. The use of Maggie meant he was about to ask me for something, or apologize for something, or, as I would find out within the next 10 minutes, both. My mother was in the kitchen, standing at the island with a cup of tea in her hands. She looked up when I came in, and I saw her face do that small contraction it always did, right before she said something difficult, the way her mouth tightened at the corners. "Sit down, Margaret." "I'd rather stand." "Sit down." I sat. My father came around the island and sat across from me. My mother stayed standing, which told me everything I needed to know about who was running this conversation. "Your father and I have made a decision," she said, "about the house." "What house?"
"Your grandmother's house." The kitchen went very quiet. I could hear the refrigerator humming. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. "What about it?" "We sold it." I stared at her. I waited for her to say something else, something that would make those 3 words mean something different than what they sounded like. She didn't. "You sold it," I repeated. "Yes." "When?" "The closing was last Friday." Last Friday. 4 days ago. 4 days during which my mother had texted me twice about Thanksgiving plans and not mentioned a single word about selling the house that had been promised to me. The house I had keys to. The house I drove past once a week just to look at the porch and remember what it had felt like to sit there with now. That house was mine. "That house," my mother said, "was in your father's name. Eleanor left it to him." "That's not true." "Margaret, I have the deed. The lawyer handled everything. Your father inherited the house when she passed, and we decided as a family..." "As a family?" My voice came out higher than I meant it to. "I'm family. I wasn't asked." "You weren't a party to the inheritance, Margaret. The house was your father's. He had every right to sell it." "She told me she changed her will." I could hear how my voice was starting to shake, and I hated it. I hated that I sounded like a child. "She told me, the summer before she died. She said she'd already changed it." My father wouldn't look at me. He was staring at the granite countertop, his hands folded in front of him like a man at a funeral. "Dad?" He didn't look up. "Dad, look at me." He looked up. His eyes were wet. I'd never seen my father cry, not once in my life, and I felt something cold travel down my spine because it meant he knew. He knew exactly what they had done. "Maggie," he said, "we needed the money." "For what?" My mother answered before he could. "Your father's business has been struggling. We've been carrying debt for years. The sale of the house allowed us to clear it. It was a difficult decision, but it was the responsible one." The responsible one. I repeated the word slowly,
tasting them, feeling how absurd they were in my mouth. You sold my grandmother's house to pay off your debts? Your grandmother's house, my mother said, and now her voice had a hard edge to it, was your father's house. It came to him through inheritance. How much did you sell it for? She hesitated. That's not your concern. How much? My father said, quietly. $480,000. $480,000 for a house on a corner lot with a wraparound porch and an apple tree in a neighborhood where houses had been selling for over $600,000. They'd taken whatever the first buyer offered. They'd taken it fast before I could find out, before anyone could stop them. I stood up. Margaret, sit down. We're not finished. Yes, I said. We are. I drove home with my hands shaking on the wheel. I sat in my car in front of the bakery for 20 minutes before I could make myself go upstairs. The smell of the night's first bread was already starting to come up through the floor of my apartment when I walked inside, and for the first time in 3 years, it didn't comfort me. It just made me think of Nell, and how she would have died all over again if she'd known what they did. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch with the lights off and tried to think. The thing was, I knew Nell. I knew her the way you know someone who raised you. And the Nell I knew did not lie about something like a will. She didn't say, I've already changed it, lightly. She didn't make promises she didn't keep. But my parents had a deed. My parents had a closing. My parents had $480,000 in their bank account and a buyer who already owned the house. Unless... I sat up so fast my coffee cup slid off the arm of the couch. Unless what Nell had given me that summer on the porch wasn't just a verbal promise. I went to the bookshelf in my bedroom. I keep a few of Nell's old books there, the ones she gave me herself before she died. Cookbooks, mostly. Her copy of The Joy of Cooking, with the cracked green spine and her handwriting in the margins. Her Bible, which I never read but couldn't bring myself to put away. And a thin little volume called A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, which had been her favorite novel. She'd given me that book the same afternoon we sat on the porch. She'd said, "Read this again, Margaret. It's the best book ever written about being a girl who has to learn how to be her own person." I'd taken it home and put it on the shelf and never opened it. I'd meant to. I just hadn't. I took it down now, with my hands shaking, and I sat on the floor of my bedroom and opened it. There was a piece of paper folded inside the front cover. It was a single sheet, typed, with a notary stamp at the bottom, dated August 17th of the year before she died. The header read, "Last Will and Testament of Eleanor Margaret Whitaker." I read it 3 times. It was not the same will my parents had. It was dated 9 months later than the one they'd presented, and it left the house on Edgewater Drive, along with all of its contents, to me, Margaret Ellen Whitaker, her granddaughter, in its entirety. At the bottom, below the notary seal, was a small handwritten note in Nell's familiar slanted script. "Margaret, keep this safe. Your father will try. He has been trying for years. Trust no one but yourself. I love you. Nell." I sat on the floor of my bedroom, and I cried until I couldn't see. I called out sick the next morning. I called my friend Jenna, who'd gone to law school with my brother before my brother stopped speaking to all of us, and I told her what had happened. She came over within the hour with a thermos of coffee and the kind of grim, focused expression I remembered from when we used to study for finals together. "Read it to me," she said. I read it to her. She listened all the way through. When I finished, she sat back on my couch and pressed her fingers against her temples. "Margaret, this is huge. If this is real, if it's a valid, notarized will dated after the one they're using, it supersedes the earlier one. The sale could potentially be unwound. At minimum, your father committed fraud. He'd say he didn't know about this one. Did he? Oh no. He knew. We sat with that for a minute. You need a probate attorney, Jenna said. Not me, someone who specializes. I know a guy. His name is David Acosta. He was 3 years ahead of me, and he's one of the few honest ones. I can't afford a probate attorney. You can, if you win. I called David Acosta that afternoon. He met me at his office on Friday morning, a small office on the 4th floor of a building downtown with a window that looked out over the lake. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with a calm, careful face and a handshake that didn't try to prove anything. I showed him the will. He read it twice, holding it up to the light, checking the notary stamp, examining the signature. Margaret, he said, if this is genuine, and I have no reason to think it isn't, your father sold a house he did not own. The 2018 will you've shown me would supersede any earlier will. And if your grandmother died after this document was executed, this is the operative document. What do I do? You file a petition to reopen the estate. We submit this will to probate. We get an injunction on the proceeds of the sale, which I'm guessing have already been spent or are being spent. We move fast. We move quietly. And we don't tell your parents anything. They'll find out. Eventually. But by the time they do, the money will be frozen, and the new owners of the house will be facing a clouded title, which is going to put pressure on everyone. The buyers didn't do anything wrong. No, they didn't. And depending on how this goes, the court may allow them to keep the house and rule that your father owes you the proceeds plus damages. Or the sale may be voided. There's a range of outcomes, but your starting position is strong. I left his office feeling like I'd swallowed something hot and alive. For 3 years, I'd lived with the absence of my grandmother as a quiet, settled grief. Now it had teeth. Now it had a voice. And the voice was saying, do this for her. The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. Thanksgiving came. I didn't go. My mother called me 3 times. I let it go to voicemail every time. On the 3rd call, she finally said, in her flattest voice, Margaret, your father and I would like you to come for dinner. We can talk about this like adults. We can come to an understanding. I called David. Should I go? Absolutely not. Don't engage. Don't respond. Don't apologize. Don't explain. Don't negotiate. We file Monday. I spent Thanksgiving alone in my apartment. I made Nell's stuffing recipe and I ate it on the couch and I watched the parade with the sound off. I thought about her a lot that day. I thought about her hands. I thought about the way she'd said, trust no one but yourself. And I wondered how long she had known what my father was capable of. How long she'd been preparing me to fight for something I didn't even know existed yet. We filed on Monday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, the new owners of the house had been served notice of the title dispute. By Wednesday morning, the bank had frozen the remaining proceeds in my parents' account, which David told me amounted to a little over $300,000. My father had spent the rest paying off business debts and a small mountain of credit cards. My phone started ringing Wednesday at 11:18 a.m. I didn't pick up. It rang 23 times that day. Voicemails from my mother that got progressively less composed. A message from my father, the longest one, in which his voice cracked in the middle and he said, Maggie, please, please pick up, please. I didn't pick up. On Friday, my mother showed up at my apartment. I knew it was her before I opened the door. There was a particular way she knocked. 3 sharp raps. Not impatient exactly, but absolutely certain that whoever was on the other side would answer. I'd heard that knock my entire life. I opened the door. She looked smaller than I remembered. She was wearing her coat and her good earrings, the pearl ones, and her hair was set the way she had it set every Friday morning at the same salon she'd gone to for 20 years. But her eyes were tired in a way I'd never seen before. "May I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked into my living room and stood there, looking around like she was seeing it for the first time. She'd been in my apartment exactly twice before in the 4 years I'd lived there. "It's nice," she said. "What do you want, Mom?" She turned to face me. "Your father is 68 years old, Margaret. He has heart problems. The stress of this is going to kill him." "That's not my problem. He's your father. He sold my grandmother's house. He inherited that house. He had every right." "He didn't inherit it. There's a second will. He knew about it." She went still. The kind of still that only happens when someone has been caught. "What second will?" "Don't, Mom." "Margaret, what second will?" "You know exactly what second will. Nell told him about it. She told him she'd changed her mind, that she was leaving the house to me. And he convinced her to give him the old will and pretend the new one didn't exist. Or he stole it. Or maybe he just hoped she'd never tell anyone else. But she did tell me. She told me everything. And she gave me a copy." My mother sat down on my couch. She sat down slowly, like a woman whose legs had stopped working. "You have a copy?" "I have a copy. Notarized, dated 9 months after the one Dad filed. And it's already in front of the probate court." She put her face in her hands. I watched her. I watched her for a long minute, and I waited to feel something. Triumph, maybe? Or pity? Or even anger? But what I felt was just tired. Tired in my bones, in a way I hadn't been even when I was crying on the floor of my bedroom 3 weeks ago. "Mom," I said. She didn't look up. "Mom, look at me." She looked up. Her mascara had run. She looked old, suddenly. Old in a way she hadn't been even at Nell's funeral. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Why didn't you call me before you did it? Why didn't you give me a chance to say goodbye to the house, to take the things that mattered, to be part of the decision? I would have helped you. If you'd come to me and said, 'Margaret, your father is in trouble, we need to sell the house,' I would have figured out a way. Maybe I'd have bought it from you, maybe I'd have sold it myself and given you the money. I don't know. But you didn't even ask. We thought you would say no. I might have, but you didn't even ask." She was quiet for a long time. "Your father," she said, finally, "is not a strong man, Margaret. I know you don't see him that way. I know you think he's just selfish, just weak. But he is also frightened. He's frightened all the time. He has been since he was a boy. And your grandmother knew it. And she protected him from it for 60 years. When she died, all of that protection went away. And he didn't know how to live without it. He started making bad decisions, bad investments. He was too embarrassed to tell anyone, even me, for a long time. By the time I found out, the debts were so enormous that I couldn't see a way out except to sell the house. That doesn't excuse it. I'm not asking you to excuse it. I'm telling you what happened. You lied to me. You told me Nell left the house to him. That doesn't excuse it. I'm not asking you to excuse it. I'm telling you what happened. You lied to me. You told me Nell left the house to him. I believed she did. He told me that was what the will said. I never read it myself." She paused. "Until now." "What do you mean, until now?" "I read it last night. I went into his office, and I went through the files, and I read the will he filed. And then I went through the safe in our bedroom. And in the safe, at the back, behind your father's life insurance papers, I found this."
She reached into her purse. She took out a sealed envelope. She held it in her hands for a long time before she handed it to me. "He didn't destroy it," she said. "I don't know why. Maybe he couldn't bring himself to. Maybe he wanted to be caught. I don't know." I opened the envelope. It was a copy of the same will I had in my bookshelf, notarized, dated, signed by my grandmother in her familiar slanting script. How long has he had this? 3 years. 3 years? Since right after her funeral. The lawyer gave it to him. He told the lawyer he would make sure you got your copy. He never gave it to you. I sat down on the floor. I couldn't make my legs hold me up. "Margaret," my mother's voice was almost a whisper, "I'm not asking you to forgive him. I'm not even asking you to drop the case. I think you should keep going. I think you should get every penny of what your grandmother wanted you to have. But I wanted you to know that I didn't know. I wanted you to know that when I told you the house was your father's, I wasn't lying to you. I was lying to myself. And I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for all of it." She stood up. "I'm leaving him," she said. "I should have left him a long time ago. I see that now. I'm staying with my sister in Pittsburgh for a while. I just wanted to tell you in person." She walked to the door. She put her hand on the knob. Then she turned around, and for the first time in my adult life, I saw my mother look at me like I was a person, and not a problem.
"Your grandmother was right about you," she said. "She always said you would be the strong one. I didn't believe her then. I do now." She left. I sat on the floor of my apartment for a long time after she was gone, holding 2 copies of my grandmother's last will in my lap, one in each hand. The case took 4 months to resolve. David Acosta was a careful, ruthless attorney, and he used the second copy of the will my mother had given me as leverage in a way I would never have thought of. He argued that my father had been in possession of the genuine document for 3 years, that he had concealed it from probate, that he had filed an earlier, superseded will knowing it had been invalidated. He argued that the sale of the house had been fraudulent on its face. The new owners of the house, a young couple named the Bergmans, were terrified. They'd done nothing wrong. They'd paid fair market value, they'd had clean inspections, they had a baby on the way. David and I talked it through one evening in his office, and I told him I didn't want to displace them. I didn't want to be the reason a family lost a home, even if it was Nell's home. We worked out a settlement. My father transferred to me the $300,000 that had been frozen in his accounts. The Bergmans were allowed to keep the house with clear title. My father signed a judgment for the remaining $180,000, which would be paid out of his retirement accounts over the next 4 years. He would not go to jail because I declined to press criminal charges, but the civil judgment was on his record, public, searchable, and permanent. The day I signed the settlement, I drove out to Edgewater Drive one last time. The Bergmans had repainted the porch. It was white now, instead of the soft gray Nell had loved. They'd taken down the swing. I didn't blame them. It was their house now. It had always been more honest to say it was a house than to say it was Nell, because Nell was gone, and no amount of money or paperwork or legal maneuvering was going to bring her back. I parked across the street, and I sat in my car for a while, and I looked at the apple tree. The apple tree was still there. They hadn't touched the apple tree. I cried a little, and I thanked Nell out loud. And then I drove home. I used part of the money to pay off my student loans. I used another part to put a down payment on a small house, my own house, in a neighborhood not far from where Nell had lived. It has a porch, it has a yard. It does not have an apple tree, but I planted one the week I moved in.
a young Macintosh from a nursery up in Geauga County, and I think about her every time I water it. My mother and I talk on the phone now. Not often, not the way some mothers and daughters do, but she calls me on Sundays from Pittsburgh, where she lives in a small apartment near her sister and works part-time at a bookstore. She is different now, quieter, more herself maybe than she ever was when she was married to my father. My father and I have not spoken since the day the settlement was signed. He sent me a letter once, about 6 months later. I read the first paragraph, in which he apologized in the careful, distant way I had heard him apologize my entire life, the way that always made the apology feel like it was about him and not about me. I didn't read the rest. I put it in a drawer. I think one day I'll be ready to read it, and I think one day I might even write back. But I'm not there yet, and I've made my peace with that. Forgiveness, I've learned, is not a deadline you have to meet. It's a door you open when you're ready, and not before. There's a thing I think about sometimes, late at night, when I can't sleep. I think about how close I came to losing all of it. Not just the house, not just the money, but the truth. If I hadn't opened that book, if I'd given it away to a thrift store or let it sit unopened for another 10 years or lost it in a move, my parents would have gotten away with it. My grandmother's last wishes would have been buried with her. Her granddaughter, the one she'd held through every nightmare, would have spent the rest of her life believing that Nell had changed her mind, that she'd been forgotten, that the woman who had been more of a mother to her than her own mother had decided, in the end, that she didn't matter. That, more than the house, more than the money, is what my parents almost stole from me. The paper saved me, but Nell saved me first. She knew. She knew her own son well enough to know what he was capable of. She knew her granddaughter well enough to know what she would need. And she made sure, in the quiet, careful way she did everything, that the truth would find me when I needed it. I keep the original will in a safe deposit box now. The copy my mother gave me is in a frame on my wall, next to a photograph of Nell on the porch swing, taken the summer before she died. I look at it every morning when I drink my coffee. The lesson I took from all of it, the one I want to leave you with, is this. Be the kind of person who tells the truth, even when it costs you. Be the kind of person who writes things down, who keeps the receipts, who doesn't trust that the people who love you will always do right by you. Love is not the same as honesty. Family is not the same as safety. The people who are supposed to protect you sometimes don't, and when that happens, you have to be able to protect yourself. And if you are lucky enough, somewhere in your life, to have a person like Nell, a person who sees you and believes in you and prepares for you in ways you don't even know about until you need it, then love them while you have them. Tell them what they mean to you. Sit on the porch swing as long as they'll let you. Listen when they tell you to read a book. You never know what they've tucked inside the cover. If this story resonated with you, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoy meaningful stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more.